before the thunder of Sherman tracks rolled across Europe, before the roar of Abrams engines echoed through desert sand. The story of American tanks began not with a bang, but with hesitation. It's a tale of experimentation, a race to catch up with modern warfare, and ultimately, a journey that reshaped global armored conflict. This isn't just about steel and firepower. It's the story of how the United States learned to fight mechanized war, adapted faster than its enemies, and created some of the most iconic fighting vehicles in history. Let's rewind to World War I. While Britain and France were pioneering the first tanks on the Western Front, the United States entered the war without a single one. America's initial foray into armored warfare was humble, relying entirely on foreign designs. The first tank to serve under the American flag was a license-built version of the French Renault FT, which we called the M1 917 light tank. It was small, slow, but revolutionary in its own right, with a fully rotating turret that became a standard feature on nearly all future tanks. The war ended before the M1 917 could be deployed in large numbers, but it laid the crucial groundwork for American armored doctrine. There were ambitious projects, like the massive Mark 8 Liberty tank, a joint Anglo-American effort, but it was a beast that arrived too late for the party. After the war, a wave of isolationism and severe budget cuts brought tank development to a near standstill. The Roaring Twenties were a quiet decade for American armor. The interwar period was a time of quiet learning and fragmented experimentation. The U.S. Army was cautious. Doctrine focused on tanks as infantry support weapons, not as independent, decisive arms of their own. We saw a series of experimental designs like the T1 Cunningham and the M1 combat car. These vehicles were more about exploring concepts, mobility, suspension, armaments, than about building a powerful army. They were testbeds, not war machines. As the 1930s drew to a close, the rising storm in Europe and Asia forced a change. The M2 light tank and the slightly larger M2 medium tank represented a serious step toward modernization. The M2 medium, with its multiple machine guns and a 37mm main gun, was an awkward but important stepping stone. It wasn't the tank that would win the next war, but it was the tank that taught America how to build it. Then came World War II, and everything changed overnight. The American industrial machine roared to life, and tank development went into overdrive. Out of this crucible came the most iconic American tank of all time, the M4 Sherman. The Sherman wasn't the most heavily armored or the most powerfully armed tank on the battlefield, especially when compared to the German Panthers and Tigers it would later face. But its genius lay elsewhere. It was incredibly reliable, easy to produce on a massive scale, and simple to repair in the field. Its adaptability was legendary. Over its service life, the Sherman was fitted with 75mm guns, higher velocity 76mm guns, and even 105mm howitzers for infantry support. It fought in the deserts of North Africa, the hedgerows of Normandy, the jungles of the Pacific, and the frozen fields of the Ardennes. The Sherman was the dependable workhorse that carried the Allies to victory, but the Sherman wasn't alone. The U.S. also fielded nimble light tanks like the M3 Stuart, prized for its speed and reconnaissance roles, and its successor, the M5 Stuart. Early in the war, before the Sherman was ready, the M3 Leo Grant, as the British called their modified version, filled a critical gap. It was an unusual design, with its main 75mm gun mounted in the hull instead of the turret, a compromise that got a powerful gun into action quickly. As the war progressed and German armor grew heavier, America had to respond. The answer was the M26 Pershing. Arriving late in the war, the Pershing, with its powerful 90mm gun and thick armor, could finally go toe-to-toe with the big cats of the German army. It was a true heavy hitter and marked the transition toward the post-war concept of the main battle tank. And we can't forget the unique American doctrine of the tank destroyer. Vehicles like the M10 Wolverine, the incredibly fast M18 Hellcat, and the powerful M36 Jackson were designed to hunt and ambush enemy tanks, relying on speed and firepower over heavy armor. After World War II, the new reality of the Cold War triggered a rapid shift in tank design. The focus was now squarely on countering the massive armored formations of the Soviet Union. This led to the famous Patton series of tanks. Beginning with the M46 Patton, a heavily upgraded Pershing, the lineage continued with the M47, the M48, and finally, the legendary M60. For decades, These tanks formed the backbone of NATO's armored fist. They served globally, fighting in Korea, Vietnam, and numerous conflicts in the Middle East. American engineers relentlessly pushed the boundaries of technology. Gun stabilizers allowed tanks to fire accurately while moving. Advanced optics gave crews the ability to see and fight at night, and armor compositions became stronger and more sophisticated. The M60, armed with a formidable British-designed 105mm gun, became one of the most widely used and successful tanks in modern history. During this era, America also flirted with true heavy tanks one last time. Experimental monsters like the T-29, T-30, and T-34 were built to carry massive guns capable of defeating any conceivable enemy armor. But as technology evolved, the idea of a single, versatile main battle tank won out, and these giants were confined to the history books. Then, in the 1980s, came a revolution. The introduction of the M1 Abrams redefined the very concept of a tank. The Abrams was a complete departure from what came before. Instead of a diesel engine, it was powered by a quiet, powerful gas turbine, giving it unprecedented speed and acceleration. Its protection was no longer just steel. It was a revolutionary composite armor known as Chobham, which offered incredible resistance to modern anti-tank weapons. The original M1 carried a 105mm gun, but the upgraded M1A1 variant introduced the devastating German-designed 120mm smoothbore cannon. Later, the M1A2 integrated a fully digital battlefield network, advanced thermal sights for both the gunner and commander, and sophisticated targeting systems. When the Abrams first saw major combat in the Gulf War, the results were staggering. It demonstrated overwhelming dominance, capable of destroying enemy tanks from miles away, often before the enemy even knew they were being targeted. In conflicts in Iraq and beyond, the Abrams has cemented its reputation as arguably the most lethal and survivable tank ever built. Of course, the history of American armor is filled with fascinating side stories and experimental dead ends. There was the gargantuan T-95 super heavy tank, more of a self-propelled bunker than a tank. There was the ambitious MBT-70, a joint US-German project in the 60s that was packed with futuristic technology but became too complex and expensive. And who could forget the M551 Sheridan? This unique air-droppable light tank was armed with a bizarre gun launcher system that could fire both conventional rounds and guided missiles. It saw service in Vietnam and the Gulf War, but its complex systems and thin armor gave it a troubled reputation. Each of these projects, whether a success or a failure, contributed valuable lessons that shaped the tanks that followed. And that spirit of innovation continues today. While the main battle tank remains king, there's a renewed interest in lighter, more mobile platforms, leading to new vehicles like the M10 Booker, designed for a rapidly evolving modern battlefield. Looking back, the story of every American tank ever made is a reflection of a nation learning on the fly. It began with borrowed French designs and grew into a story of industrial mastery that produced the Sherman in unbelievable numbers. It evolved from the brute force of the Patton series to the digital lethality of the Abrams. American tanks may not have always been the most elegant or the most powerful at any given moment, but they were built with a clear purpose. To be produced at scale, to fight anywhere in the world, to endure the harshest conditions, and to win wars. The true strength of American armor isn't just found in its steel, but in its relentless, pragmatic ability to adapt and evolve faster than the battlefield itself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into military history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more.